Hello and welcome to today's Hindu newspaper analysis of the Delhi edition. Okay, from the editorial section, treating values of individuals' freedom as triple S. The hijab judgment has struck a blow against each of these principles: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Okay, these are the most important for the freedom of expressions and fundamental right of the any country. Okay, our social context is built on an edific that grants preeminence to individual choice. The Constitution's preamble recognizes this then it places an onus on the state to secure to all citizens among the other things. Liberty, equality and fraternity. Liberty, equality and fraternity. The last of those values is fortified by a further commitment. The state, the preamble says, will guarantee fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and the integrity of the nation. The chief architect of the Constitution, Sri B.R. Ambedkar, saw the standard contained in these words, as forming a triumvirate of values. Liberty, equality and fraternity, he said, were principles of life as union of eternity, diverse one from the other, and the very purpose of democracy will be defeated. The Constituent Assembly believed that it was only a deep commitment to these principles that can help usher in a social revolution in the country. The structure of India's democracy, the various minutiae of administration that Constitution spells out were each built on the idea that securing individual happiness required the state to foreground these standards. Enforcing popular morality. What is popular morality? In that picture, independent courts that framers thought would stand as a guardrail against any effort to undermine social democracy. But far from acting as sentinels on the Kuibai, as a former Chief Justice of India once described, the Supreme Court of India's rule judiciary has time and again enforced the popular morality of the day. Treating values of individuals. Freedom as dispensable. Toughness. Tuesday judgment by the Karnataka High Court in Resam versus State of Karnataka is newest addition to this litany. It upholds a ban imposed on the use of hijab by students in classrooms across the state, that is Karnataka, and is doing so strikes as a blow against each of the principles contained in B.R. Ambedkar's Union of Trinity, Court's use of precedent. The judgment is premised on the three board conclusions. First, the court holds that the wearing of a hijab is not essential to the practice of Islam, and therefore the petitioner's right to freedom of religion is not imprisoned. Second, it finds that there is no substantive right to free expression and privacy that can be claimed within the confines of a classroom. And third, according to it, since the government's order does not by itself ban the use of hijab, and since it is otherwise neutral, there is no discrimination aimed at Muslim women students. These conclusions suffer from one flaw or another in rejecting the plea that the wearing of hijab is a legitimate exercise of religious freedom. That court refers to a plethora of precedent that points to only essential religious practices enjoying constitutional protection. According to the court, the petitioners failed to produce any evidence to show that the use of a hijab was essential to Islam. And despite this, it proceeds to perform a theological study, which one would think it is ill ill-equipped to do, especially without conducting a full-fledged trial, and concludes that Islam does not make the wearing of hijab, wearing of a hijab mandatory. This is an extraordinary finding for a secular court to make. No doubt similar leaps of judgment have been made by the judiciary in the past. For example, in 2004. For example, 2004 Supreme Court concluded that the performance of the Tandwa dance was not indispensable to the Ananda Margi's faith, even though the followers of that religion believed it to be so. But if the Karnataka High Court's inference is partly based on the flipped doctrine, it must take the blame for posing to itself the question of whether at all hijab is essential or religious. Free choice and state action. Unlike many of other cases or many of the cases in which the doctrine of essential practices is invoked, this was not a case where individual freedom was at odds with group rights. On the contrary, this was a case where exercise of free choices was curtailed by state action. The petitioners had contended that they wore the hijab as a matter of conscience. Article 25 of the Constitution guarantees to all persons not only an equal rights to profess, practices and propagate religion, but also freedom of conscience, अंतरात्मा की स्वतंत्रता. Council pointed to the Supreme Court judgment in Bijoy Emanuel 1986, where the rights of the Jehovah's Witness who refused to partake in the signing of the national anthem was protected. There the court ruled that so long as students consistently believed that they must not participate in the recital, their rights could be abrogated only in the interest of public order, mortality or health. In Resham, the Karnataka High Court draw a facile distinction from Bijoy Emanuel. The judgment holds that there is no evidence in this case that the petitioners consistently believed in the necessity of hijab. This is anomalous, given that once a pleading is made on affidavit, the onus ought to have been on the state to establish that the petitioners were not, in fact, wearing the hijab out of a sense of conscience. The court then proceeds to make an even more astonishing assertion: all cases where right of conscience is pleaded, according to it, are ipso facto cases of religious freedom and therefore ought to be subject to the test of essentiality. This conclusion ignores the fact that Emmanuel was explicitly decided based on conscience and that conscience need have no direct relation to religious faith. It is possible, for example, that the hijab might not be essential to Islam, and yet that Muslim women chose to wear it as an exercise of their own individual's belief. On the classroom space. On the classroom space, that the court was simply unimpaired to grapple with this difference is even more evident from here. Many accommodations. Gist. Kendriya Vidyalaya, for example, as the petitioners claimed, allow for hijab within the counters of the prescribed uniform. But the judgment holds that to make such an accommodation would defeat the very purpose of uniform. This finding fails to recognize that even within the existing dress code, many accommodations are in fact made. For instance, religious and cultural marks on the forehead and accessories on the other part of the body are not disallowed. If the purpose of the uniform is to allow for no differences, surely every exhibition of faith in the classroom must be stamped out. The judgment makes repeated references No constitutional secularism, but secularism properly understood. Demand perceivably what the petitioners here were pleading for the right to agency, choice and equal treatment and more than anything else. A guarantee of fraternity undergirded, as the preamble says, with dignity to every individual. Okay. Next article. Clean energy must use the battery of circular economy. Most important article. An efficient waste management ecosystem is crucial to manage the huge waste generated in India's new energy push. What is gist of this article? In the budget speech this year, the Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman emphasized the role of cleaner technologies such as solar energy and batteries in India's future economic growth. In addition, she mentioned the importance of transitioning to a circular economy from the existing linear one, market estimates. The call for a creation of circular economy is significant, since an efficient waste management ecosystem would be necessary to manage the enormous waste generated by renewable energy projects in the coming decades. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, an intergovernmental organization that supports countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future. The cumulative waste generated by India's total installed solar capacity could be as high as 325 kilotons by 2030. A consulting firm, JMK Research and Analytics, estimates that market for battery recycling will be around 23 gigawatts with hours by 2030. The prevalence of a circular economy could also partially insulate these industries from potentially supply chain shocks triggered by extraneous development. As studied by the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, also known as CWE, has estimated that India would need over 5,630 gigawatt of solar and 1,792 gigawatt of wind energy to achieve its net zero target in the year 2070. A robust renewables-based management and recycling ecosystem could help people and India's reduce environmental harm, provide energy security, and also create new jobs. So here 6 steps to nurture a circular economy in the Indian renewable energy industry. एक क्लीनर फ्रेमवर्क हम वन बाय वन डिस्कस करेंगे, सब लोग अटेंशन करेंगे, इधर ध्यान देंगे. फर्स्ट पहला पॉइंट फर्स्ट पॉइंट, पॉलिसी मेकर्स शुड रिवाइज एग्जिस्टिंग इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट रूल्स टू ब्रिंग वेरियस क्लीन एनर्जी कंपोनेंट्स अंडर देयर एम्बिट. These rules are based on extended producer responsibility that identifies component producers as responsible entities to manage their waste products. The Indian renewable energy industry has a complex structure that comprises various manufacturers, assemblers, importers and distributors. Hence the revised regulations should clearly define the responsibilities of various stakeholders involved in the renewable energy value chain and provide annual targets for the collection and the recycling of waste. Second, dumping and burning of different components should be banned. समझ गए? Currently, in the absence of any regulation, land filing is the cheapest and most common practices to manage renewable energy waste. However, it is not environmentally sustainable. All clean energy technologies thrive on metals and non-metals with different level of toxicity. If the waste equipment is dumped in the open, then these elements could leach into the environment and enter food chain. Studies show that the leaching of heavy metals such as lead and cadmium from solar photovoltaic modules could increase by 90% and 40% respectively under acidic conditions. Further, burning the polymeric incapsulant layer in solar photovoltaic modules releases toxic gases such as sulfur dioxide, and some volatile organic compounds. Research and development is essential. Third, the renewable energy industry should invest in the research and development of recycling technologies. Recycling is a multi-step process that includes dismantling, disassembly, and extraction. Dismantling is largely a manual process. That is sometimes automated. कभी-कभी अपने आप होती है. Disassembly can be done mechanically, thermally, or chemically. Besides these traditional methods, investment in the research and development could help discover new ways of recycling that results in higher efficient and less environmental damaging footprint. Industries should also explore technology transfer with global recycling for establishing domestic waste recycling facilities. For instance, efficient metal recovery from waste provides a resilient supply of raw material for the renewable energy manufacturing industry. Focus on finance quality. Fourth, there has to be a creation of innovative financing routes for waste management. Access to finance is a major roadblock for players in the recycling ecosystem. The central government should nudge public and private banks to charge lower interest rates on loans disturbed for setting up renewable energy based recycling facilities. Assurance of a minimum waste quantum to run these facilities and issuing performance-based green certificates to recycles that could be traded to raise money for waste management would also help ease the financial burden. A market for recycling materials could also be created through mandatory procurement by the renewable energy and other relevant manufacturing industries. Fifth, there needs to be an improvement in product design and quality. Renewable energy component manufacturers should find substitutes for toxic metals such as cadmium and lead used in their products and simplicity products designing to reduce recycling steps. Such improvements in the process of efficiencies could go a long way in the curbing waste creation at the source and its subsequent impact on the environment. Sixth, the union and state governments should set stringent quality control standard for components used in their standards. This will prevent premature end of life of components and consequent waste creation. Substandard components generate considerable waste due to early life damage that is often irreplaceable, and the components often have to be discarded. Such quality enforcement could also position India's renewable energy industry as a global supplier of quality products, largely in the informal sector. The renewable energy recycling ecosystem has a complex structure where there are multiple actors involved, but it would be an integral part of our journey towards sustainable future. Beyond sustainability, it would also offer equality employment opportunities, for the future generations, as a new job would be created, across the entire value chain of waste management and recycling. Further, workers in the informal sector could access various socio-economic benefits and look forward to an improved quality of life. We ought to remember that the majority of India's recycling sector is informal, and workers have to work in unsafe environment without standardized wages. Therefore, developing an efficient renewable energy waste management and circular ecosystem is imperative rather than a choice. We can ignore this, but only at our own peril. So these are the two important and prominent articles from here. New social core. Essentiality flipped Karnataka High Court हिजाब से related है, इसको देखते हैं. Election है, a clear base of ideologically affiliated voters helped the BJP thought anti-incumbency effects. समझ गए? Anti-incumbency का मतलब विरोधी लहर. Is not most important. We have today significant article. United Nations boats are not black and white. ये दोनों आर्टिकल हम टूवर्ड्स इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन, हम इन दोनों आर्टिकल को ही हम स्टडी करेंगे. Okay, delegations do not vote for or against or other countries, they vote for themselves. Okay, TP Srinivasan ने लिखा, देख लेते हैं. The green, red and yellow buttons, the desk of delegates that the United Nations General Assembly and related conferences indicates only some of the options available when the resolutions are put to vote. Over the years, the voting options have gone beyond yes, no and abstention. Yes, हाँ और या परहेज करना वोट से. It is possible to be present and not participating or absent at the time of the vote. This makes it possible for member states to nuance their positions to suit their needs. The history of the United Nations shows that innovative use has been made by the member states on several occasions. Some diplomats have often used these provisions to diverge slightly from their instructions to do a favor to some friendly delegations. Voting system. What is voting system in the UN? Important. The voting system in the UN Security Council is rigid. कठिन है. Every vote counts because the resolutions adopted by the Security Councils are mandatory for all members of the UN. The resolutions adopted under Chart 7th of the UN Charter action with respect to threat to the peace and breaches of the peace and the acts of the aggression are even more significant as they involve even war, as it happened in the case of Iraq, जैसा कि इराक के पक्ष में हुआ था. In fact, दरअसल the provisions of the UN Charter on voting have already tweaked. The Charter provisions requires the concurring votes of the permanent members, provided that in decisions under Charter 6, Pacific settlement of disputes, and under paragraph 3 of the Article 52, a party to a dispute shall abstain from voting. It would seem, therefore, that an abstention by a permanent member would amount to a veto. But it is now agreed that if a permanent member does not fully agree with a proposed resolution, but does not wish to cast a vote, it may choose to abstain, thus allowing the resolution to adopted if it obtains the required number of 9 favorable votes. An additional provision to add conditionalities to the vote is the explanation of vote before and after the vote. The explanation of the vote before the vote as acts canvassing for the votes of others, and explanation of the votes after the vote can even amount to taking with the left hand what has been given with the right, as it happened in the case of India's abstention on the Russian invasion. All the principles were stated in the explanation of the vote, but the vote itself was prompted by political expediency. India's vote. In recent vote on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the impression is that China and India voted together to indicate neutrality. But the impact of the vote of China is more nuanced than India's. If China had voted against the resolution, it would have amounted to a vote which would not be keeping with the cultivated image of China as a country which opposes foreign intervention in the sovereign states. But the Chinese abstention reflected the new understanding between Russia and China. समझ गए? एक नई समझ को पैदा करता है. Integrally, the requirement of compulsory abstention by the affected parties in cases relating to Charter 6 does not apply to other resolutions, and thus permanent members can veto resolution against them even under Charter 7th of the UN Charter. The Indian abstention in cases relating to the Soviet Union and the UN was institutionalized by Indira Gandhi in 1979, when India became the only country outside the Soviet blocs to abstain in the UN General Assembly. Okay, UN General Assembly, after the Soviet Union had voted a Security Council resolution against its intervention in Afghanistan. The world and India have changed since then. तब से विश्व और भारत दोनों ही बदल गए हैं. But the compulsion for India to abstain today are as valid as they were in 1979, जैसा कि तब था, regardless of the emergence of the Quad. समझ गए? Quad के उद्भव के regardless. Technically, India could have abstained only in the substantive vote in the UN General Assembly, as the resolution contained references to invention and other strong words. But it also abstained in the UN Security Council on an earlier procedural vote to refer the matter of the to the General Assembly. The same applied in the case of Human Rights Council also. The US criticism of India's vote was as expected in the context of the Quad. It would be remembered that its criticism was even more severe in 1979, when India's relations with US were not so close. The US took stern actions like denying Terra for fuel and supporting the jihadists in Afghanistan at that time. The carefully crafted voting resolutions in the UN General Assembly have created comic situations. Once the Chinese delegates went out of the hall when a vote was in progress, when he returned, he realized that he could not follow the instructions given on that particular resolution. He took the floor to say that instead of his being marked absent, it should be recorded that he would not have participated in the vote if he was present. In roll call votes, some delegates often vote wrongly, but the Secretariat which no better records as a vote, it should have been cast. It should have been cast. On one occasion, a senior politician who came from India as a delegate wanted to change India's vote on Afghanistan. When India's name was called out, he said yes, and I had to shut from behind abstentions. Fortunately, the delegates did not hear the correction. Such events are legion at the UN. The UN regulations and practices on voting are designed to enable the delegations to express their national opinions, taking into account their vital national interest in the ultimate analysis. Delegations do not vote for or against other countries, they vote for themselves. In the case of India, votes in the Security Council, the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council reflects its current national concerns in the light of the situation in Ladakh and Afghanistan. The increasing ties between Russia and China and its membership of the Quad, without naming or blaming anyone, India has expressed its fundamental position that war is not a solution and diplomacy should be the only option to prevent the war. It may have caused repulse in some countries, but it shall remain relevant in the emerging global order by the keeping its option open. This article, written by T.S. Srinivasan, has represented India at the ambassadorial level at the UN in New York, Vienna and Nairobi, and served as the head of the UN division in the Ministry of External Affairs. So this article is sufficient from here. Let's move to another article. Towards inclusive development. हम कैसे inclusive development की ओर जा रहे हैं? Okay. The accessibility guidelines for higher education institutions and universities require some modifications. Most important article है. The rights of persons with disabilities Act 2016 guarantees to every disabled person a large bucket of rights and entitlements. But the reality that disabled persons confront in their everyday lives as far as removed from the large progressive vision. The Supreme Court judgment in Avni Prakash versus National Testing Agency 2021, is emblematic of this gap. As the appellant answer book during an exam was snatched away due to the testing authorities' confusion that the center's Kylones she did not get at all of extra time to watch. She was legally entitled. कानूनी रूप से वो पात्र थी उसकी. The court had to remind the competent authorities about their duty to provide her reasonable accommodations and inclusive education. Against this backdrop, the draft accessibility guidelines and standard for higher education institutions, also known as HES, and universities, released by the University Grant Commission, also known as UGC, are a welcome intervention. A procedural flap. A procedural flap क्या है? The way in which the guidelines were released, however, left much to be desired. The public notice preceding the guidelines was inaccessible to persons with visual disabilities. This was because the notice appears to have been printed and poorly scanned. If the document had been a digital document authenticated by the legal signature of the competent authority, it would have been fully accessible. Worse still, the same problem was seen late last year in the public notice released by the Union Home Ministry with respect to its guidelines on the creating disabled friendly infrastructure and the guidelines released by the Civil Aviation Ministry on making air travel more disabled friendly. The suggestions in the guidelines are capacious in scope and breathtaking in ambitious. What are the guidelines ignore, however, is that disabled students are neglected and sidelined at worst or grudgingly accepted at the best in universities. The guidelines have to be realistic. Previously, each chapter of the guidelines should be followed by a checklist that distilled the key action items contained in that chapter. Further, the checklist should divide these action items into those that must be immediately implemented. For example, accessibility to information and communication technologies and making learning materials available in the accessible format, and those that must be implemented progressively. For example, accessibility to extracurricular activities. Further, compliance of HEI with the checklist must be mentioned by the University Grant Commission by requiring HEIS to submit a compliance report on an annual basis instead of a self-certification mechanism. The UGC should also be empowered to take disciplinary action against HEIS not compiling with guidelines. Assessment of disability-based needs. An assessment of needs persons with diverse disabilities should be conducted on an annual or biannual basis by the Equal Opportunity Cell Enabling Unit to devise and thereafter revise the institutional plan for inclusion of students with disabilities. Such an assessment will equip with the administration to undertake specific need-based interventions. The assessment must be in the form of hearing in which the plan's content or implementation can be discussed. Further, When a student with a disability joins an HEI, the HEI should conduct an assessment of their disability-based needs. On this basis, a plan should be drawn up to fulfill those needs. Each HEI must maintain data on students with disabilities on the basis of parameters such as applications, enrollment, retention, and participation of students in the academic and non-academic activities. Finally, guidelines should provide for a redress mechanism along with lines of the rights of the persons with disabilities. Okay, Rules 2017. The mechanism may be restored to by aggrieved persons with disabilities in case the concerned HIES does not implement or violate the UGC guidelines. The district education officer referred to in Rule 7 of the rules can be empowered to deal with any such infractions. Likewise, the University Grant Commission can consider instituting a mechanism for affected persons with disabilities to file complaints about the violation of these guidelines. Such complaints must be dealt with within a time-bound fashion. A separate chapter should be added to the guidelines which comprehensively outlines the modalities of the grievances redress mechanism. In sum, for the disabled, high-quality education represents a unique pathway, for empowerment and meaningful participation in the society. If modified suitably, these guidelines can serve as a catalyst to unlock this transformative potential, for every student with that disability pursuing higher education. Basically, this article written by Rahul Bajaj, Senior Resident Fellow at the Bidhi Center for Legal Policy. Hussain Anis Khan is a lawyer and research fellow at the Bidhi Center for Legal Policy, New Delhi. ये डाटा भी पॉइंट भी जो डाटा पॉइंट हिंदू का आता है ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इसको थोड़ा सा हम अभी डिस्कस नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि बिकॉज टाइम इज वेरी लेस. ए रिविजन टू रिपेम द केरला मॉडल है, पॉलिटिकल है, कोई खास चीज नहीं. टेक्स्ट एंड कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्या है? इन टाइम्स बार विद युआन एज ए रेफरेंस करेंसी फॉर इंटरिम ऑयल ट्रेड. जिस्ट देखते हैं, व्हाट इज जिस्ट ऑफ दिस आर्टिकल. As part of Western sanctions, Russian banks were removed from SWIFT. Payments and energy imports from the country have also reduced. Thus, Russia has been trying to sell out at a significant discount using the yuan as a reference currency. The US is using its economic advantage to freeze dollars that belong to its adversaries. To avoid this risk, many countries have been looking at the alternatives to the US dollar. US dollar for oil trade between India and Russia. Neither the ruble nor the Indian rupee is suitable as a global currency for trade. Therefore, the yuan can become an alternate option. Let's move to next article. The curious case of sealed over jurisprudence. What is gist of this article? The sealed cover jurisprudence is a practice used by the Supreme Court and sometimes lower courts of asking or accepting information from the government agencies in sealed envelopes that can only be assessed by judges. The Supreme Court derives its power to use from Rule 7 of Order 13 of the Supreme Court Rules, Section 123 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872. The cities of this practice contended that it is not favorable to the principle of transparency and accountability of the Indian judicial system. What is the criticism and what do the courts say? What is sealed cover jurisprudence? समझ गए? It is a practice used by the Supreme Court and sometimes lower courts of asking or accepting information from government agencies in sealed envelopes that can only assessed by judges. Let's move to a last article. High-checking across Adams galaxy. It is difficult to classify Douglas Adams' Felicitas writing where he portrays his jolly absurd and yet poignant with worldview. So this concludes for today's Hindu newspaper analysis. Thanks for watching. Okay, so today's festival of Holi. So very this happy Holi. Okay, to all others. Okay, so thanks for watching.